They fined me $675 for absolutely nothing. My fence was completely legal, but our HOA president decided I needed to be taught a lesson anyway. When my wife calmly told her we wouldn't pay a cent, this woman lost her mind. She started screaming about community standards and teaching us respect. Then she pulled out her phone and called the police right there in my driveway. My law enforcement friends will handle this, she smugly announced. I was furious and ready for war. My wife just stood there, smiling like she knew something I didn't. She did. Drop a comment if you've ever dealt with a power-drunk neighbor. Looking back, I should have realized something was off with Catherine Stone from the very beginning. The first time she introduced herself, she showed up at our door with a basket of artisanal cookies and that flawless suburban perfect smile. This was 18 months ago, right after Tracy and I moved into Meadowbrook Springs, when she had been promoted to what I assumed was a bigger county role. I didn't know the details. Government work had always sounded to me like endless meetings and paperwork. But Tracy had seemed excited. I was too busy trying to establish my construction business to pay much attention. Bureaucracy wasn't my world. Building houses was. Our daughter Emma was thriving in her senior year, pulling top grades while preparing her Stanford application. With extracurriculars, volunteer hours, and an early decision deadline looming in November, she seemed poised to achieve everything we'd hoped for her. Tracy and I felt like we'd finally found our suburban paradise. A safe neighborhood, excellent schools, friendly neighbors, and Catherine. She seemed like the jewel of this little world, always knowing everyone's names, organizing block events, and arriving with those expensive cookies for new families. Catherine had retired early from her real estate career, she explained, to focus on community leadership. She mentioned casually that she had been unanimously elected HOA president. That should have been my first red flag. Nobody gets elected unanimously unless they're either adored or feared. She carried herself with a polished confidence, always impeccably dressed, even when walking her dog. And when she visited our home, her eyes wandered just a bit too long over the layout, as if she were memorizing the floor plan. It felt less like small talk and more like reconnaissance. The first conflict came with a violation notice about our fence. It arrived one October morning, hand-delivered by Catherine herself, who looked like she'd just walked off a real estate billboard. She apologized profusely, holding a designer clipboard with professionally bound documents. "Brandon, I hate to be the bearer of this," she said, her voice dripping with practiced sympathy. "The board voted unanimously last night. Your fence extension violates Section 12.7. She handed me the papers with a perfectly manicured hand, quoting the fine of $500 while appearing regretful. The whole act was polished, like she'd performed it many times before. The fine didn't bother me as much as her presentation. Catherine seemed too professional, too rehearsed. She listed appeal procedures, offered compromise solutions, and even recommended which office to call. It felt like talking to a trained customer service agent, not a neighbor volunteering for an HOA. And yet, she remained unfailingly polite, almost gracious, as though finding me was a painful duty she carried out for the good of the community. Tracy's reaction surprised me even more. She listened calmly, posture straight, voice level. "I'll need 30 days to review this according to appeal procedures," she said, tone clipped with quiet authority. I blinked at her. When did my wife learn to speak like that? She even mentioned that her staff would review the documents. Staff? I thought she just attended county meetings. Catherine's expression flickered for the briefest moment, as though she were recalculating something before her polite mask returned. After Catherine left, Tracy pulled out official county letterhead to draft a response. I watched her write with precision, citing statutes and codes as if it were second nature. "Since when do you draft responses on county stationery at home?" I asked. She gave me a vague answer about proper formatting and protocols, but her confidence unsettled me. She sounded less like someone who attended meetings and more like someone who ran them. Emma came home that afternoon looking shaken. Word about our violation had already spread through her high school. "People are saying we're in trouble with the HOA," she said. By lunch, rumors had escalated into something bigger. Whispers that our family didn't respect community rules. Emma defended us, but she ended up in a heated argument with classmates. Teachers noticed her distraction. For the first time, my daughter's spotless academic record showed cracks. How had news of a private notice traveled so quickly? That evening, while pulling into the driveway, I spotted Tracy's county-issued vehicle. On the dashboard was a permit that read, "Executive Staff Parking." My head tilted. What kind of county supervisor had executive privileges? When I asked her, she brushed it off, saying something about needing frequent access for coordination. Her explanation was vague, and suddenly her tailored suits, the business cards I'd never flipped over on her desk, and her phone calls that sounded more like briefings than chats all took on a new weight. Meanwhile, Catherine wasn't subtle in hinting at escalation. "I hope this doesn't need to go beyond the community level," she'd said with feigned concern. "Things can get complicated once multiple governmental bodies get involved. Who talks like that over a fence dispute?" And Tracy's response was equally cryptic. "I've handled escalations before, Catherine. Trust me." They spoke like two generals testing each other's resolve. That night, I couldn't shake the unease. My wife, whom I thought simply attended county meetings, had staff, executive privileges, and the kind of confidence that made even Catherine hesitate. Catherine, who prided herself on research and control, had looked genuinely caught off guard by Tracy's calm authority. Something wasn't adding up. I watched Tracy pore over documents late into the evening, eyes sharp, hands steady. She wasn't just reading, she was strategizing. And for the first time, I asked myself the question that would haunt me. If my wife were just a county supervisor, why did she carry herself like someone much more powerful? And why, of all things, had Catherine Stone, the woman who seemed to know everything about everyone, looked so genuinely surprised when Tracy stood her ground? Tracy approached the HOA dispute with a precision I had never fully appreciated before. While I fumbled through the thick homeowners agreement, trying to decipher Section 12.7, she was already buried in municipal databases, cross-referencing ordinance histories and procedural requirements as if she lived in that world daily. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating layers of government portals I didn't even know existed. To her, complex legal language seemed like second nature, like reading a recipe card. Watching her work made me realize there were parts of my wife's professional life I'd never taken the time to understand. 2 days later, help arrived in the form of Dave Mitchell. He showed up at our door, carrying artisanal coffee and a sympathetic smile. Recently divorced, he moved into a rental 3 doors down about 6 months prior. There was a slightly desperate air about him, the kind of neediness you might expect from someone trying to rebuild his life. But he also radiated sincerity. "I've been watching Catherine target newcomers for 2 years now," he said, spreading a pile of documents across our kitchen table. "You're not the first. She's been driving families out. I've been documenting everything, just waiting for someone willing to fight back." His preparation was meticulous. He produced violation timelines, photos, and escalation notes with a level of detail that made me wonder how much of his time was spent on this personal crusade. He seemed to know Catherine's entire routine. Property inspections every Tuesday morning, board meetings Thursday nights, violation notices Friday afternoons. He even predicted which types of infractions she'd go after first. "She always starts with fences and landscaping," he explained. "Once people are painted as problem residents, she escalates noise complaints, parking violations, whatever it takes to push them out." The specificity of his knowledge was both impressive and unsettling. Sure enough, Emma's troubles unfolded, just as Dave predicted. Within 2 weeks, her perfect grades slipped. Her Stanford early decision application felt threatened, and her friends grew distant. Teachers mentioned concern over her focus. She even had a panic attack during a prep session when her counselor suggested backup schools. It was as if the social fabric around her had been rewoven overnight to isolate her. I couldn't shake the sense that Catherine had designed it that way. Emma's counselor, Mrs. Jennifer Harrison, seemed overly invested. She scheduled extra meetings, asking probing questions about her family routines, financial stability, and even Tracy's county job. At first it came off as concern, but her curiosity felt unusually sharp. When I mentioned it to Dave, he frowned. School counselors have access to county databases, he said. If she's sharing that information with Catherine, it would explain how your private matters are reaching the HOA. His warning planted seeds of paranoia I hadn't considered. Meanwhile, Tracy made a phone call that changed everything. Time for full disclosure, she said into the receiver, tone commanding. Yes, I'm certain about the timeline. Coordinate across departments for public presentation. Her words carried the authority of someone accustomed to giving orders, not requesting favors. When I asked afterward, she brushed me off with jargon about interdepartmental coordination and budget cycles. Still, I couldn't ignore how naturally she spoke the language of power. Catherine's second visit confirmed the escalation. She arrived with another stack of documents, this time far more aggressive. Her tone stayed polite, but the materials looked like they'd been prepared by legal counsel. I really hope we can settle this quietly, she said. But the board insists on strict enforcement. Her binder included case precedents, escalation protocols, and statutory citations. This was no longer a friendly warning. It was a legal offensive. Even stranger was how quickly Catherine seemed to know our countermeasures. Hours after Tracy filed an appeal, Catherine referenced it in casual conversation, hinting at our legal strategies as though she'd been in the room when we discussed them. Dave's frustration matched mine. Someone is feeding her information, he said flatly. With that kind of access, it has to be someone tied to county systems. He encouraged us to tighten our circle and share fewer details. Ironically, he wanted more access himself, claiming it was the only way he could strategize on our behalf. His advice leaned heavily toward escalation. Don't just file appeals. Go public. File simultaneous complaints with multiple agencies. Make this about accountability. He spoke like someone familiar with politics, not just neighborhood disputes. At the time, I was grateful. He sounded like the ally we needed when most neighbors avoided us out of fear of Catherine. Then Dave proposed a trap. Plant false information and see how quickly it reached Catherine. Tell Emma you're thinking about moving, he suggested. Keep it within the family. If Catherine brings it up, we'll know exactly how the leak works. It felt clever, almost devious. That night, over dinner, Tracy and I casually mentioned to Emma that relocating might be our only option. She looked horrified but played along. Within 24 hours, Catherine greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. So, how's hunting going? The trap had sprung, just as Dave predicted. Meanwhile, my business began to suffer. 2 clients canceled contracts after hearing whispers about my HOA troubles. Rumors in the construction community spread faster than seemed natural, costing me thousands in lost revenue. Catherine's $500 fine had snowballed into something that threatened my livelihood. Dave expressed outrage, offering to vouch for me professionally. I'll testify to your family's integrity, he said. His loyalty felt reassuring even as our situation deteriorated. But then he mentioned something odd. I ran into Catherine at the county building, he said casually. She was asking about filing procedures. My gut twisted. Why would Catherine be at the county offices? And why did Dave sound like it was no big deal? Tracy noticed my unease but didn't comment. She just kept working late into the night, her desk littered with statutes, filings, and official documents that I now realize she handled with expert familiarity. Watching her, I couldn't help but think my wife wasn't just playing defense. She was preparing for a larger war, one Catherine didn't even realize she'd started. Catherine's community standards and safety meeting looked less like a neighborhood gathering and more like a corporate presentation. The community center had been transformed into a professional space with charts, photographs of violations, and property value projections. Though she never mentioned our family by name, the implication was unmistakable. Photos of our fence loomed large on the projector, framed to appear ominous. Data, charts, and carefully worded warnings suggested that property values would plummet if non-compliance patterns weren't addressed. It was calculated intimidation, presented with the polish of a political campaign. The room split almost immediately. Older residents worried about stability and property value nodded along with Catherine's pitch. Newer families, especially those who had already felt her enforcement tactics, shifted uncomfortably. At first, it seemed Catherine had the upper hand. But then Dave stood up, positioned near the front row. He spoke with fiery conviction. This isn't about community protection. This is targeted harassment. His passionate words swayed a few undecided neighbors. Though I noticed something troubling, his choice of words amplified the drama, making our situation sound worse rather than better. After the meeting, I realized Dave had revealed details no one outside our family should have known. He talked about how we were considering moving, a lie we had planted deliberately. Somehow, in defending us, he had given Catherine exactly what she needed, proof to frame us as disruptive. Neutral neighbors began to whisper. Where there was smoke, they assumed there must be fire. Meanwhile, Emma's crisis deepened. With Mrs. Harrison suddenly on leave for a family emergency in Florida, she lost her main advocate at school. Substitute counselors didn't have the same rapport, and Emma spiraled further. Her grades dipped, her Stanford essay faltered, and she confessed she was considering dropping advanced placement classes. I wanted to shield her, but the campaign against us had woven itself so tightly into our lives that even her future was being strangled. At home, Tracy continued balancing county work with our defense. She missed part of the meeting that night for what she called urgent county business. When she returned, she carried herself with the same composure I'd seen before. Calm, steady, as though this storm was familiar. During a break, she mentioned casually that her staff had called about an important budget vote. I froze. Staff, budget votes. These weren't tasks for a minor official. My wife wasn't just participating, she was orchestrating. Catherine's momentum grew when she began a petition drive. She branded it concerned residents for community standards, carefully worded to appeal to people's financial self-interest rather than personal grudges. 30 signatures appeared almost overnight. The document demanded accountability from families refusing cooperation. Everyone knew who the target was, but the wording was vague enough to shield Catherine from liability. Watching her maneuver made, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about fences or lawns. Catherine was building a political case. Tracy, however, wasn't cowed. Her ability to navigate pressure amazed me. When a neighbor asked about her specific responsibilities, she answered with bureaucratic precision. I coordinate interdepartmental policy and resource allocation. It was vague yet authoritative enough to leave an impression. People recognize authority even when they don't understand its scope. For the first time, I saw cracks in Catherine's confidence. Her eyes narrowed, her smile faltered. She didn't seem sure anymore who she was really up against. The highlight of the meeting came when Catherine hinted at law enforcement support. Our compliance is backed by connections in law enforcement, she said, her tone meant to intimidate. She didn't need to finish the sentence. The threat was clear: comply, or the sheriff might come knocking. Whispers rippled through the room, fear mixing with resignation. Then Tracy spoke. Law enforcement connections can be unpredictable, she said evenly, a small smile tugging at her lips. Sometimes you think you know the hierarchy, and then you discover things aren't what they seem. Her remark carried hidden weight, as if she knew something Catherine didn't. Even I was unsettled by her calm certainty. Catherine blinked, her composure slipping long enough to reveal real uncertainty. For the first time, it was Catherine who seemed unsure. After the meeting, I overheard two neighbors whispering. Did you see how that county supervisor handled Catherine? The way people deferred to Tracy, investigators, a deputy, even Catherine herself, suggested something far greater than a mid-level county role. When we got home, the weight of everything pressed on me. My business was collapsing. 2 more clients had withdrawn to avoid being associated with legal trouble. Emma was unraveling under pressure. Neighbors we'd once considered friends avoided eye contact. And yet Tracy remained steady, composed, almost serene, as if she'd weathered worse storms. I finally asked her, "How do you stay so calm?" Catherine is threatening police action. The whole community is against us. Emma's falling apart. And you sit here reviewing documents like you've already won. Tracy looked up from her papers, eyes sharp but gentle. Because I know something Catherine doesn't, she said. She wouldn't elaborate. Maybe she didn't need to. In that moment, I realized this war wasn't just about Catherine's obsession with control. It involved secrets Tracy carried, secrets even I hadn't uncovered yet. The stage was set. Catherine thought she was winning. Dave seemed our most loyal ally. Emma was under siege. My business teetered on the verge of collapse. And Tracy sat in the middle of the storm, calm and resolute, preparing a counterstrike Catherine could never anticipate. Tracy's counteroffensive was bureaucratic artistry, and it made me realize how badly I'd underestimated her governmental expertise. She filed comprehensive complaints with the State Ethics Board, the Code Compliance Division, and the Consumer Protection Agency, each submission executed with the systematic precision of someone who understood which agencies had jurisdiction over HOA misconduct and how to present evidence for maximum impact. Her documentation was professionally formatted, legally precise, and strategically targeted to trigger multiple, simultaneous investigations that would overwhelm Catherine's volunteer resources. Watching her navigate procedural requirements and regulatory frameworks with insider fluency felt like discovering she'd been speaking a foreign language fluently, while I assumed she was learning vocabulary. Her complaint filings referenced specific statutes, included properly indexed evidence, and demonstrated familiarity with governmental processes that suggested extensive experience rather than casual participation. The information leaks continued with disturbing precision, confirming that someone with direct access to our planning discussions was feeding Catherine real-time intelligence about our defensive strategies. Even though we limited family conversations to private dinners, Catherine somehow knew about Tracy's ethics board filing before the investigator called to schedule our interview. She referenced our legal strategy in casual encounters, anticipated procedural moves with uncanny accuracy, and demonstrated knowledge of our timeline and tactics that could only come from someone present during our planning sessions. Dave expressed appropriate frustration about the security breach while offering increasingly specific tactical advice. Someone with county access is definitely feeding her information, he said, suggesting we share detailed information about Tracy's work schedule and meeting availability so we could plan around her professional obligations. His eagerness to know specifics about Tracy's schedule sounded like helpful tactical planning rather than suspicious intelligence gathering, at least at first. He argued that understanding her precise availability and departmental connections would help us leverage her governmental knowledge more effectively. The trap we set to identify the leak proved devastatingly clear. We mentioned in a private family discussion that we might relocate if harassment continued, a fictional timeline for house hunting that we kept to the kitchen table. Dave had been over for coffee that day when the topic came up. Within 24 hours, Catherine casually hinted during a block encounter, hearing you could be leaving soon. The details discussed with Dave reached her faster than normal gossip ever could. My suspicion hardened. Information moved from our private conversation to Dave, then from Dave to Catherine through whatever coordination system they'd built. When we confronted him, Dave's anger sounded genuine. "I can't believe anyone would use your private conversations against you," he said, maintaining his facade of loyalty while advising we tighten operational security. He framed Tracy's caution as legal prudence. She needed bulletproof evidence before accusing community leaders or school officials, given the professional stakes. Tracy's response to the proven leak went far beyond anything I'd associated with county meeting attendance. She initiated state review boards, internal audits, and cross-department investigations that displayed deep mastery of accountability mechanisms. She filed complaints with agencies I'd never heard of, referenced regulatory frameworks requiring specialized expertise, and triggered procedural reviews that suggested authority to compel comprehensive investigations. The professional quality of her documentation and the agency's immediate interest made it clear she occupied a position far more consequential than I'd realized. My construction business collapsed with frightening speed as word circulated about our involvement in legal conflicts with community authorities. Another major client terminated our contract, and several prospects withdrew when builders feared disputes could disrupt schedules or community relations. The financial pressure mounted exponentially, turning Catherine's original fine into thousands lost in revenue, legal bills, and reputational damage. Dave offered to supply character references and vouch for our family's integrity, but his efforts couldn't offset the systematic harm to our standing in the local construction field. Emma's academic crisis reached a breaking point. She lost her honor roll, standing for the first time. Her scores dropped to levels that made Stanford early decision increasingly unlikely, and panic attacks during standardized tests became more frequent. Former friends distanced themselves, and a substitute counselor recommended reducing her course load until our family situation stabilized. What felt like calculated psychological warfare had succeeded in strangling her future. Tracy's reaction to our evidence about the leak was skeptically cautious, reminding me to avoid assumptions and to document everything carefully. Her caution felt like legal self-protection, without ironclad proof. Making accusations against community or school officials could backfire professionally. Dave agreed, suggesting we needed more comprehensive evidence before Tracy could safely support public allegations about the leak or its coordination. Catherine escalated with a certified letter, a clear shift from neighborhood pressure to legal intimidation. The letter read like a prelude to litigation, professionally drafted, citing enforcement precedents, statutes, and detailed timelines for compliance. It suggested consultation with counsel rather than volunteer HOA guidance. Her move into formal legal processes signaled confidence and access to professional resources beyond the scope of most volunteer organizations. Tracy's response carried that same enigmatic confidence that had unsettled everyone at the meeting. "Yes, Catherine, I agree. This should end soon," she said with a slight smile that hinted at privileged knowledge about forthcoming developments. "Very soon, indeed." Her tone suggested she was counting down to a predetermined outcome rather than hoping for one. Then Catherine wrote a line that made my blood run cold. "I've contacted my law enforcement connections to ensure proper compliance procedures are followed." She actually believed she had cops on her side. That arrogance made the next turn even more dramatic. State ethics investigators arrived with professional gravitas that transformed our suburban dispute into something resembling a formal inquiry. Multiple serious-looking officials, clipboards in hand, recording devices ready, and the systematic efficiency of people used to investigating public official misconduct created an atmosphere of formal accountability that made Catherine's volunteer HOA leadership suddenly look very small. Their presence legitimized our complaints in ways I hadn't expected, treating the harassment of county employees as an issue requiring state-level oversight rather than a neighborhood dispute. The lead investigator addressed Tracy with unusual deference during the preliminary interview, calling her Commissioner Phillips in a tone that conveyed recognition of authority rather than courtesy. I assumed it was standard protocol for county employees during official proceedings. But throughout the 6-week probe, the investigators consistently treated her as someone whose time was scarce and whose cooperation was valued, not compelled. They scheduled sessions around her availability, deferred to her preferences, and asked permission before recording conversations, accommodations that felt excessive for someone providing victim testimony. Each time the lead investigator referred to her as Commissioner Phillips, I brushed it off as politeness, until I noticed the junior investigators taking careful notes whenever she spoke. Their posture suggested they were documenting the words of someone whose voice carried real weight in government. I told myself this was because of her county employment, not because of any deeper authority. My confusion grew after a chance encounter at the grocery store, when Deputy Walker recognized Tracy and greeted her with the kind of formality usually reserved for judges or elected officials. "Good morning, Commissioner," he said respectfully, tipping his hat. His tone carried more significance than casual politeness. Tracy responded with ease, thanking him for his service and mentioning budget matters in passing. The exchange lasted less than half a minute, but the deputy's deference suggested he knew exactly who she was and why her perspective mattered to his department. Meanwhile, Dave continued to show unwavering loyalty throughout the investigation, offering to testify about Tracy's professional character and our family's integrity during what he called systematic persecution by extremists in the community. His support felt genuine, especially as other neighbors avoided us to escape association with ongoing legal battles. He even volunteered to research county organizational charts, saying it would help us understand Tracy's position and leverage her expertise more effectively. If we know the structure and chain of command, he explained, we can present your case more persuasively. His initiative seemed like helpful strategy rather than anything suspicious. Mrs. Harrison returned from Florida completely unaware of the accusations against her and shocked that anyone thought her behavior questionable. Her boarding passes, hotel receipts, and hospital records, all tied to her mother's cancer treatment, prove her absence had been planned weeks earlier and had nothing to do with our HOA conflict. She expressed concern about Emma's academic decline and offered counseling support to help her recover from stress-related performance issues. I was simply doing my job, caring about Emma's well-being, she said, visibly hurt. I never meant for my documentation to seem intrusive or inappropriate. Her vindication was both relieving and embarrassing, given how certain I'd been of her involvement. The investigation moved forward with impressive thoroughness. The state team interviewed neighbors, examined HOA documents, reviewed financials, and built a case with the methodical precision of professionals preparing material for prosecution, not just mediation. Their 6-week timeline reflected the seriousness of how misconduct allegations against public officials are handled. Catherine, however, remained overconfident. During her interview, she insisted Tracy was a minor county clerk abusing her position to dodge community obligations. Her dismissive tone revealed a blind spot in her research, a complete misreading of governmental hierarchy. The investigators' reactions told the story. They exchanged puzzled looks as Catherine confidently described Tracy as a low-level employee. They asked clarifying questions, clearly baffled by the disconnect between Catherine's assumptions and their own knowledge of county structure. Ma'am, could you clarify exactly what county role you believe she holds? The lead investigator asked, barely hiding his confusion. Catherine doubled down, describing clerks and coordinators trying to sound important, which only deepened their bewilderment. I overheard an exchange between investigators during a break that should have made everything clear. Wait, she doesn't know the commission chair lives here? One whispered. How do you research someone this thoroughly and miss that detail? Commission chair. At the time, I assumed they were talking about another official connected to our case, not my wife. The significance of their words didn't register, though it should have explained everything about Tracy's composure. That night, Tracy made a decisive phone call. Her tone was not that of someone asking for help, but of someone directing resources. Time for full disclosure, she said confidently. Yes, I'm certain about the timeline and approach. Coordinate with all departments for a comprehensive public presentation. The language wasn't administrative, it was executive. The 20-minute call covered procedures, jurisdictions, and coordination mechanisms, more like a chair leading planning than a staffer seeking advice. Later, the lead state investigator pulled me aside. Sir, I have to ask, does your wife know she's being investigated? Because most people in her position would have called us directly, not filed complaints through normal channels. Her position? What position? I asked. Soon after, Sheriff Williams scheduled a public hearing, described officially as resolving a conflict involving a county official and a community dispute. The phrasing made our HOA battle sound like a matter of governmental significance. Formal notification arrived on county letterhead announcing proceedings in municipal auditorium with media present and attendance by county leadership. Dave immediately volunteered to handle media outreach, claiming connections with reporters who could frame the narrative in our favor. His eagerness seemed like strategy, not deceit. In preparation for the hearing, he took detailed notes at every meeting and positioned himself as our primary community liaison, offering to organize supporters, character witnesses, and sympathetic residents. He began asking pointed questions. Do commission chairs have executive authority over department decisions? Can they override budget allocations or personnel choices? His interest came across as an attempt to understand the scope of what Catherine was really challenging. Sheriff Williams's investigation revealed Catherine's long pattern of harassment targeting families of county employees. Evidence showed she ran coordinated campaigns designed to pressure public servants through their home lives, escalating violation notices, social isolation, and financial stress until families moved away. 3 other households had already been driven out under her leadership. The tactics were sophisticated, almost calculated psychological warfare disguised as community enforcement. As the hearing approached, Tracy transformed. She shifted from suburban mother into the authority figure I occasionally glimpsed during her work calls, but never fully appreciated. In her professional suit, with official documentation in hand, she radiated the presence of someone used to scrutiny and command. Her ease navigating procedures and coordinating cross-department responses revealed an executive capacity that far surpassed administrative duties. The truth came into focus by accident. While searching her desk for our attorney's contact information, I noticed business cards scattered face up. They read, Tracy Phillips Carter, County Commission Chair. Elegant lettering that explained everything. The deference, the confidence, the investigator's behavior, the deputy's respect. Dave was present when I made the discovery. Commission Chair. That explains your confidence, he said with amazement, asking questions about her authority that seemed more curious than suspicious. Catherine had picked the wrong target. She wasn't bullying a clerk. She was attempting to intimidate the official who literally oversaw the departments she threatened to weaponize. My shock felt like realizing I'd been married to a public figure without noticing. Commission Chair meant Tracy wasn't just part of government. She was the executive authority at the county level, overseeing policy, budgets, and interdepartmental operations. I wondered when you'd finally notice the letterhead on my office documents, Tracy said, amused. The business cards have been sitting there since we moved in, but you never seemed interested in county structure. Catherine had been challenging the one person she could never hope to control. Community preparation for the public hearing reached fever pitch as residents split between supporting Catherine's enforcement of community standards and questioning her aggressive tactics against county leadership. Media notices drew attention beyond our neighborhood, with local reporters framing the dispute as a case study in HOA overreach and governmental accountability. Dave managed our supporter outreach with remarkable efficiency, contacting sympathetic neighbors and organizing character witnesses to testify about our family's positive contributions to community life. His networking skills and political instincts proved invaluable in building coalition support during the final days of preparation. Though his eagerness to control communications and direct strategy still struck me as unusually sophisticated for a simple neighbor. Catherine's research gap finally made sense when Tracy explained the name discrepancy that had fueled our opponent's fundamental misunderstanding of the situation. Catherine had searched property records for Tracy Phillips, while Tracy's professional and campaign materials used her full married name, Tracy Phillips Carter. Commission chair positions weren't listed in property databases, and Catherine's background in real estate meant her research relied on ownership records rather than political office listings. Her exhaustive investigation into our family had missed the single most important fact, one that would have completely reshaped her strategy. The irony was brutal. The same attention to detail that made her effective in harassment campaigns had destroyed her in this one. Catherine soon arrived at our house with a sheriff's deputy in tow, brimming with smug confidence. "I told you this would end one way or another," she sneered. "Deputy Walker here will explain your legal obligations." The deputy, however, looked visibly uncomfortable, his eyes flicking toward Tracy as if he recognized her. "Tell me in the comments, have you ever seen someone dig their own grave this deep?" Because Catherine had just brought the shovel to her own funeral. The county auditorium overflowed with residents, officials, and media representatives who had transformed our neighborhood squabble into a full-scale spectacle of governmental accountability and community enforcement. Catherine had driven maximum attendance through petitions and outreach, convinced that public scrutiny would expose Tracy's supposed corruption. Meanwhile, Dave sat prominently in the front row with our family, taking detailed notes and projecting steadfast loyalty that impressed neighbors who respected his apparent dedication to justice. The proceedings drew attention well beyond Meadowbrook Springs, with reporters calling it a case study in HOA excess colliding with county administration. The atmosphere felt less like a neighborhood meeting and more like a political trial, with sharp battle lines between Catherine's backers and our scattered allies. Catherine's presentation was polished and formidable, the kind of argument a legal consultant might admire. She came armed with professionally bound documents, statistical analysis, and precedent cases designed to portray Tracy as a corrupt official exploiting her office to avoid legitimate obligations. Her argument was meticulous, referencing ordinances, constitutional principles, and accountability standards with the practiced precision of someone who had leaned heavily on legal advice. We cannot allow public officials to believe their positions exempt them from the same community standards as every other resident, she declared with righteous force, her words striking a chord with those wary of political privilege. Her case wove together timelines, financial breakdowns, and testimonial support into what seemed a comprehensive indictment of misconduct demanding immediate action. Then came Dave's public testimony. His words were passionate and articulate, defending our family's integrity and Tracy's professionalism throughout the harassment campaign. I've witnessed how appropriately Commissioner Phillips has endured this persecution, he said, voice ringing with conviction that swayed undecided listeners. Not once has she abused her authority. This family has faced months of targeted harassment with grace and integrity. His defense highlighted our contributions to the community, Tracy's competence, and the disproportionate severity of Catherine's actions. Neighbors nodded, persuaded by his detail and passion. But during the first recess, everything I believed about our so-called ally collapsed. Stepping outside for air, I caught Dave behind the auditorium, speaking quietly on his phone. His words froze my blood. Yes, Catherine. The misdirection worked perfectly. Mrs. Harrison's been in Florida with her sick mother for 3 weeks. She had nothing to do with this. The false relocation rumor worked exactly as planned. They completely bought she was the leak source. The casual tone of someone reporting mission success, not betraying friends, shattered me. Dave continued, his voice low but confident. Look, I didn't expect the target to be the county commission chair. I thought she was some low-level administrator, like you said, but my intel was solid. Helped you plan this perfectly from the start. The depth of betrayal was staggering. Months of false friendship, careful manipulation, and information gathering, all while playing the role of loyal neighbor. When I confronted him, he dropped the mask. Catherine paid me $8,000 over 6 months. And honestly, your perfect family made me sick. He spat, bitterness in every word. I lost everything in my divorce. Drowning in alimony. 3 jobs just to survive. Meanwhile, you've got the perfect house, perfect kid, successful careers, stable marriage. Easy money for inside information. How was I supposed to know Tracy actually runs the county government? His resentment was pathetic and poisonous, revealing he'd targeted us not only for cash, but because our happiness mocked his failures. Then he admitted his final betrayal. He had misled Catherine too. I told her Tracy was just some minor clerk. I never corrected her. Why would I? That would have killed my paycheck. The irony cut deep. Dave had been paid to spy on the county commission chair, while convincing Catherine she was harassing a powerless bureaucrat. His lies had manufactured the exact conditions for her spectacular downfall. Inside, Sheriff Williams addressed the hearing. Commissioner Phillips, he said with formal respect, we have evidence of systematic harassment, falsified reports, and conspiracy to defraud residents. I request your input on departmental coordination before referring this case to the district attorney. The acknowledgement sent shockwaves through the room. Catherine's supporters realized they had spent months backing a campaign of harassment against the very official who oversaw county policy and budgets. Catherine's face went pale. Commission chair? Chair of what commission? She stammered, her confidence crumbling. Dave, you said she was just a clerk. The humiliation was public and brutal. Tracy rose with quiet authority. I recommend full coordination with all affected departments and immediate referral to the district attorney. This behavior threatens public officials' ability to serve and requires comprehensive investigation to prevent recurrence. Her transformation was complete, from targeted neighbor to commanding executive. The district attorney confirmed within moments. Charges would be filed within 48 hours. Catherine's allies retreated in silence. Dave's duplicity was exposed. Catherine's arrogance collapsed. And the irony was absolute. She had summoned the sheriff to intimidate a woman who literally controlled the sheriff's budget. As the room sat stunned, Deputy Walker whispered to his partner, loud enough for all to hear, "Holy hell, we just tried to serve a compliance notice to the person who signs our department's checks." The silence that followed was the sound of Catherine's world ending. The digital evidence trail exposed Dave's betrayal with forensic precision. Venmo transfers totaling $8,000 over 6 months were disguised as landscape consulting, creating a financial paper trail that proved systematic compensation for intelligence rather than neighborly help. Cell tower records placed him at Catherine's home during key planning meetings, while metadata from the photos he supplied confirmed real-time coordination. His county IT contractor logs revealed exactly when he accessed filing systems and cross-referenced our submissions against Catherine's timeline, showing how he funneled confidential information. Mrs. Harrison's vindication came with undeniable documentation. Boarding passes, hotel receipts, and hospital records proving her Florida trip for her mother's cancer treatment had been planned weeks earlier. When she returned, shocked that anyone had doubted her, she spoke with calm dignity. "I was just doing my job, caring for Emma's well-being." Her grace made our earlier suspicions feel painfully unfair. Dave's downfall was swift. Arrested on conspiracy and bribery charges, his IT contract was immediately terminated. Legal fees and unemployment led to foreclosure within months, and the community cut him off entirely. Catherine had paid him for information, but his lies to both sides created the disaster that consumed them both. Catherine's humiliation matched the intimidation campaign she had waged. The court sentenced her to community service, maintaining the same public properties she had once weaponized against others. She was ordered to write public apologies and pay restitution for fraudulent fines and legal costs. Her reputation collapsed. Neighbors abandoned her, and she eventually moved to another county to start over. The community, seeking to heal, organized a fund to support Mrs. Harrison's family during her mother's treatment, a gesture of remorse that raised over $5,000. It also helped Emma recover academically through tutoring and counseling. Harrison's graciousness revealed the strength of her character, which had been wrongly questioned. The HOA itself was dismantled and rebuilt with safeguards against abuse. Transparent elections, mandatory audits, external mediation for disputes, and rotating oversight committees. Rules now required documented justification for violations and open access to records. Residents chose transparency over intimidation, and property values rose as confidence returned. Emma bounced back stronger. She rewrote her Stanford essay around resilience under harassment, earning praise from admissions officers for her maturity. She regained honor roll standing, and the ordeal fueled her new passion for pre-law studies, turning trauma into purpose. My construction business recovered as well. Clients returned once the truth spread, and new ones arrived, impressed by our refusal to yield to corruption. Reputation damage transformed into credibility, and the contracts I gained surpassed the work I had lost. Standing firm against Catherine had cost us dearly, but in the end, it paid off. Tracy used the experience to launch a countywide HOA abuse prevention program. It trained law enforcement to recognize overreach, provided resources for families, and created oversight systems that flagged abusive patterns early. Within the first year, a dozen families avoided the nightmare we endured. Annual neighborhood events now honor Mrs. Harrison, reminding us to support families in crisis rather than isolate them. Dave's old house was sold to a quiet family who never once faced a violation. Catherine's original fence complaint was officially declared invalid. Her rule change had violated county governance requirements. The irony sealed her defeat. 6 months later, a reporter called. "Can you comment on Catherine Stone suing Dave Mitchell for fraud and breach of contract?" I burst out laughing. Even in exile, Catherine was still picking the wrong fights. If this story from Echo Hills taught you anything, drop it in the comments. Sometimes the person you battle has far more power than you realize, and sometimes your closest ally is actually your worst enemy. See you in the next video.